Hello and welcome to this mini video on burnout and the 60-hour work week. So many of you might be thinking, so what, it's 60 hours, what does that mean? Well, here's the problem. If you routinely work over 60 hours per week, you can come down with something that the Japanese have defined as Karoshi. Now, what is Karoshi? Karoshi is death by overwork. And what the Japanese have discovered is that employees who routinely work 80 hours of overtime per month are more likely to develop karoshi. And it literally is death by overwork because these workers tend to have heart attacks or strokes and literally die on the job. So when you're developing karoshi, you get increased exhaustion and anxiety. But how do you know when you're working too much? Well, you start out sitting upright at your desk, then you start slouching, and then by the end, when you're in the full exhaustion, you're basically collapsed at your desk. If we want to put this in terms of work hours, you can be sitting upright, being productive, being fully functional if you're working about 40 hours per week. But once you start working 50 hours a week, you're kind of getting into that danger zone. You're not as active, you're not as productive, you're not as creative, and you're not as innovative. And if you hit 60 hours per week consistently, then you are cognitively impaired, and if you don't have karoshi, you're definitely a very likely candidate for burnout. So how do you get to those 80 additional hours per month that the Japanese have defined as the criteria that leads to karoshi? Well, this chart might help. The standard work week is 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, and that's assuming it's an 8-hour workday. And usually it's you get the day off on Saturday and the day off on Sunday, so you work 40 hours. Barring any other toxic workplace stressors, your risk for burnout is pretty low. Now look what happens when you start working 9 to 7, 5 days a week, but you still take your weekends off. You're up to 50 hours a week, and your burnout risk starts getting higher, so you're at a medium risk for burning out based on the number of hours you're working. Now, what if you're a middle manager and you're working 9 to 7 Monday through Friday, but there's always something else you have to do on a Saturday, and you work, let's say, from 8 to 1 or an additional 5 hours? Well, now you're up to 55 hours a week, and you're at a medium-high risk for burnout. But how do we get to those 60 hours per week? Well, you're working the 9 to 7 Monday through Friday. You work Saturday, let's say 9 to 2, and then Sunday, you got some more work to do, so you might as well work 12 to 5. Now suddenly you're up to 60 hours a week and you're at a high burnout risk. Or let's say you do 5 12-hour days. Let's say Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. You still take your weekends off, but you're still working 60 hours a week, which means you're at a high burnout risk. Now, let's talk about maybe you're an executive or you're in cybersecurity or you're the medical profession. You're working 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. Yeah, now you're still taking Saturday and Sunday off, but you're working 70 hours a week, so your burnout risk is very high. Or let's say you're the workaholic. You're working 8 a.m. to 10, which is a 14-hour day, Monday through Friday, and you're only working part-time on Saturday and Sunday from like 8 to 12 on Saturday and 12 to 5 on Sunday. Now suddenly you're up to 79 hours and you're at a very high risk for burnout. Now again, this is assuming a standard 40-hour work week. So how do you get those 80 additional hours per month or an extra 2 weeks of work hours in a month? It's only 20 additional hours per week, which means you're working 60 hours per week and you do it consistently 4 weeks per month. That, my friend, is how you get to the 80 additional hours per month that can lead to not only severe burnout, but also death by overwork or karoshi. So what are the takeaways? Well, based on our previous chart, you have to notice that the hours are cumulative. You don't have to work them all in one stretch, they can be spread out over days. So it might be spread out over 7 days, which means you have no days off, or they're spread out over 6 days and you do take one day off, or you're working 5 12-hour days and you have 2 days off. You see what I mean? It doesn't mean that you're working every day. You might, but it could be you're working extensive hours in a shorter period of time. And it's the total hours that are consistently worked that lead to burnout as well as karoshi. So what are your options? Well, I have other videos on YouTube as well as e-courses on my drgeripuleo.com site. But the big thing to look at is that studies have shown that the greatest productivity is in a 6-hour workday. So don't think that just because you're working more hours, you're being more productive. As you burn out, your cognitive functioning is impaired, your decision making and problem solving are compromised, and quite frankly, you're not a lot of fun to be around, so you're not getting along with coworkers or your clients. So why don't you try pulling back your hours and looking at your productivity rather than the number of hours that you work? Because you don't want to get burned out or to suffer the devastating effects of karoshi.